Good morning. Thank you for joining us today for working with students with disabilities during COVID-19. My name is Scott Hicks, and on behalf of the Teaching and Learning Center and Dr. Miko Nino of the Office of Online Learning, we are thrilled for you to join us during today's webinar. Today we'll be learning from Interim Director and 504 ADA Coordinator Vanessa Halls of the Accessibility Resource Center. In this session, we're going to explore working with students with disabilities during these challenging times. COVID-19 has impacted each of us in some way, and it impacts some of us more than others. For some of our students, the impact might be heightened, given the presence of a disability. This webinar identifies common responses from students with various disability diagnoses and explains how best to work with them during these unprecedented times. We'll talk about hints, tips, and strategies to keep in mind and welcome your questions and comments during the webinar. You can enter them into the chat box, and I'll moderate them for Q&A afterward. If you're a faculty member who's taking part in our Certificate for Accessibility and Inclusion in Teaching and Learning, this webinar will contribute to your certification, and if you're interested in learning more about the certification, please contact Vanessa and me. Again, thank you for joining us today, and I'm going to give the floor now to Vanessa.
All right, good morning. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this webinar this morning. I wanted to talk with you about working with students with disabilities during COVID-19. As Scott said, we are definitely in unprecedented times right now. We've never been exactly here, therefore we don't have a roadmap for being exactly here and knowing what this should look like, what will make this run most smoothly. So I think this is a good time to work with one another, give a lot of grace, and let's put our heads together and think about these things, think through these things. With that being said, let me share some information with you. So you know this is a challenging time for students, faculty, staff, administration, all of us, absolutely all of us. For students, these are some challenging areas. Think about since the move to online back in March, and since the change in semesters with everything going on here now, some classes are face-to-face, some have moved online, some are hybrid. Hybrid can take a couple different forms. Some challenges from students may come in the form of physical organization. What does their workspace look like now? So are they home? And if so, where is home? Are they homeless? Do they have to go to a library? Is a local Starbucks okay? Are those places open? Is there reliable internet? What does that look like? Might it be reliable sometimes, or might they have to work in the early hours of the morning before everybody else in the neighborhood gets on the internet? What does reliable internet look like? Where's home? What might that workspace look like? It's going to be a lot different if they're home as opposed to something predictable in a dorm or an apartment here. Minimizing distractions. Easier said than done. Think about if you live in an apartment or a dorm here on campus. There are always people running by, people stopping in to say hello. You've got the busyness of college and campus life. What about home? What if you have other younger children, younger siblings in the home? What if there are people doing online learning there? What if you live in a loud neighborhood? What if, like a student told me earlier this week, what if she constantly hears shooting in the background? There are a lot of distractions. Think about the things you can control. Think about the things you can't control. Often there's a lot more you can't control than things that you can. Where is quiet space? Where can you develop or cultivate some quiet space? If you need background noise, and that's something that some of our students like to use now, something that they may not have thought about before. This app, coffeevifity.com, or this website, actually, there's an app that you can get to from the site that gives you background noise. You can hear coffee shop noise. You can hear like train station. It's nice background to imagine you're with other people, but just gives you some white noise. And that may be another thing. If you're used to being with people and all of a sudden you're home or you're in a dorm or an apartment that's completely by yourself, it may be uncomfortable. So you may really appreciate that background noise. In terms of physical organization, it may be difficult to navigate the LMS here. What if they've never used Canvas? What if they've never logged on intentionally for online classes because they've avoided them like the plague? Well, things look a little bit different now. So they may not know how to navigate that. They may not know how to get started. So there can be a lot of fear in that. Then take a look at mental organization, time and task management. All of our students do not come to college as wonderful planners, task managers, organizers. One thing that we work with in my office a lot is, so let's plan together. If you have this many hours in a day, how do you get this many assignments done? How do you break this down? So many times students coming into our office have never used a calendar or a planner. They've never had to. In high school, they could always get by. The teachers would tell them what they needed to do. They would keep them on task. Here, not the same. So we may need to check in with them to see, how are you doing? Do you have enough time? Do you know how to structure time in your day? Do you know how to do these kind of things? Also, a time zone check. Do you know what time zone we're in here as opposed to where you may be logging in to take a test, to participate in a discussion group if it is live online, those kind of things. So a lot of things to keep straight in your mind. Also with electronic organization, if you now have to think about everything being online or a lot of things being online, and now you've got to figure out, how do I store my files? If you're doing more things online as opposed to writing it on paper and turning it in, where do you store your files on your home computer? If I save a file today, can I find it when I need it last week? Or have I put it in a safe place, never to be found again? So where do I store those files? Do I have a certain naming convention for files? Do I name them per class, per paper? How do I do that? These electronic organization pieces are things students may never have had to think about before because they've never been this much online before. Also, challenges for students. What we've talked about before, those challenges, add to that disability. The definition of a disability means one or more of your major life activities are substantially impacted. Think about your major life activities. Things such as learning, concentrating, focusing, hearing, seeing, neurological issues, reading, writing, digestion, immunity, respiratory concerns. And those are just a few. Think about all of those things. I've dealt with all of those things today. So if you think about one or more of those being substantially impacted on top of this new environment that we're living in, that can be very challenging, very scary for students. Also, in terms of accommodations may look a little bit different now. Or maybe a student can manage in the classroom, but now that they've gone online, they can't manage as well there. That's why we're trying to take face-to-face classes. So accommodations may look a little bit different. A big one we have seen is online testing versus face-to-face testing. Please excuse me. We've seen a lot of students who really want to be face-to-face when they take a test. Online testing for them is distracting. It's scary. It's uncomfortable. It's nerve-wracking for them. So where they could handle it in the classroom looks very, very different online. So let's talk about some different categories of disabilities, what these students may experience, and what we can do to help combat that. If you have deaf or hard of hearing students in your classroom, you have probably already heard from me about this. We knew at the outset there was going to be an issue because you have a lot of students who depend on lip reading. So if you can't hear me, if you can't see my mouth, then we're going to have trouble because here you're required to have a face covering. So we have clear panel masks. We have face shields currently. Clear masks are coming. That's something that we are working on. There needs to be some way, either a face shield or a mask with a clear panel, that you can still protect yourself with a face covering, but the students can still have that access to be able to see you so they can hear you. They hear with their ears some, they hear more with their eyes. Also, in terms of that, make sure to face your students when you're speaking, especially if you're wearing any kind of face covering. Try not to face the board when you're speaking because the sound's going to bounce to the board and back. Plus, if you turn around and they're depending on those auditory cues to lip read you, they're going to miss that. They will also have difficulty knowing who's speaking in class. If you don't raise your hand and you just start speaking, and I am deaf or hard of hearing, if I'm hard of hearing, I'll know somebody's speaking around me, but I may not be able to tell where the sound is coming from. So if you can maybe gesture toward the student, call the student by name, somehow indicate who is speaking, and then it would be really good if you could repeat the question asked and or other answers given. This will help for students that we know are deaf or hard of hearing. It's also going to help for these students that have not yet identified that they are having trouble with their hearing as well. They also may experience issues accessing online course content. So when you're lecturing online, are you lecturing live? If so, that information needs to be captioned. It's got to be at a 98 to 99% accuracy rate. Industry standard is 99%. But if you think about access, you want to make sure the student has real quality, real-time access. So if you're doing something live online, it's very, very cost intensive because we have to get an outside vendor to provide those captions. So it's going to be a permanent cost that will come out of your departmental budget. Typically what happens is professors will record their content in WebEx or another medium. They can caption after the fact, edit those captions, and then save those lectures so the students can hear them later. That is no cost from an outside vendor. Sometimes people ask about captions versus transcripts. If you have something very brief, maybe 2 to 3 minutes, a transcript is okay for that. But if you think about real-time access, if I'm watching a 10, 15-minute video clip and I have to watch a little bit, then stop and completely change screens or completely turn my head to read a transcript, that access is not equal. We also have some students who are using assistive listening devices, ALDs. They may have headphones or earbuds in that magnify the sound and or can connect with their hearing aids. The professor may wear or hold a lapel mic. These will be cleaned between every use. Sometimes the students will want you to watch them clean it just so you know it's clean, but that might be something else that you'll see as well. For students who are blind and visually impaired, so many of our disabilities, let me back up and say, are on a spectrum. You may have students who are deaf, profoundly deaf, meaning they can hear the lowest rumbles of a jet engine, maybe, to students who are hard of hearing, maybe just that high frequency sound is gone. Typically, women's voices go out first because they're higher frequency. Students who are blind and visually impaired. You may see some students who just don't see very well, and you may have some who don't even have light perception. So many of our disabilities are on a spectrum. So if you're working with someone who is blind or visually impaired, if there's no vision, the student may feel unsure of this new arrangement. They may have been used to where the furniture was, but now in the classrooms, everything's different for social distancing. They may not know where to find their seat, how everything is set up, where to find the cleaning products. They're going to want to clean their area as well. You can ask if the person needs assistance, offer to help them with classroom navigation. Don't automatically assume and grab their hand and lead them towards somewhere. Always ask and give them the control there to say, and the respect to say, yes, please, I need your assistance. There may be a need for a sighted guide. You're going to have a lot more physical touch if there's someone who's blind or very visually impaired. It's going to be very important to follow protocol for hand washing and sanitization because you may need to, the person, if you're working as a sighted guide, is going to hold onto your elbow and follow you very closely. So masks will need to be worn, face coverings will need to be worn. Also, because they're going to touch you to figure out which way to go, make sure that your hands and their hands are washed. You may have access issues with online visual materials in your classes. Make sure all your materials, including your PDFs, can be accessible by a screen reader. Screen readers read from left to right very mechanically, very logically. So make sure whatever information it is can be accessed by a screen reader. If it's a PDF, a screen reader is going to think of that as a picture and it won't read it. So you need to do an alt tag with any pictures. We can help you make sure your PDFs are accessible. If you need us to do an access check at any point, please let us know. We're more than happy to do that. Also, you may have, I told you about high touch things. If you have a student who is visually impaired, they may be using a handheld magnifier. Again, cleaning protocols. So it'll be important to have cleaning protocols out if this person is using a dome magnifier or a handheld magnifier to look at something in a biology lab or to look at parts of a cell, something like that. Again, as I said, we can do an access check for you. We can convert any materials that you will need in real time. If there are handouts or articles that you'll need for class, if this is a student who uses a screen reader, we can certainly make sure that those articles or those handouts are in a format they can go back to the room and access with a screen reader. Also, if you're going to be going over PowerPoints in class and you have someone that's completely blind, they would need those in Braille so they can follow along. We can do those kind of material production things for you if you need. So if you have someone with ADHD, let me back up and say one more thing first. So sorry. Audio description. If you have someone who is blind or visually impaired, if you're watching a movie, they're going to be able to hear everything just fine. But if you're depending on something that's very visual, if the music sounds scary and then someone screams, but it's never outright said who screamed and what happened, they're going to miss those pieces. So audio description may be something you need to think about if you are doing something that's very, very visual, if you can't access it with just your eyes. So we can talk about that. That's something that is coming down the pipes, is something that will need to be done, but that's another access issue. We know we can certainly share some resources there with you if that is something that you need. So please let us know there. Now let's go back to ADHD. Students with ADHD may experience difficulty with the seating arrangement. They may like their structure, they may fight against it, but they may like exactly where they sit. I know some professors are using a seating chart for contact tracing with COVID right now. It may be better to work with the student and the seating chart to find the best position for them. Some students need to be in the front. Some students need to be absolutely not near the window or not near the door. They should be able to tell you what works best for them and what does not work best. They should be able to advocate for themselves and talk with you about an optimal seating position. They may have difficulty with calendars and due dates. They may not be well organized because it's so hard for them to sustain attention. We talked about that before. That's happening to a lot of our students. But when you know that your thinking, concentrating, focusing, those major life activities are impacted by ADHD, that heightens the experience. Let students know where to find the most updated class information on Canvas. Let them know, and if you repeat it and you feel like you're repeating it too much, you're probably not repeating it too much, actually. Let them know, because it might be on the third time you said it, they have tuned in and managed to harness their attention and said, okay, I'm really going to focus this time. I'm going to get this. So help them to know where the information is. They may experience extra heightened distractibility. Please be patient. Please help them refocus. Remove distractions from the environment when it's under your control. You may see more stress balls or fidget toys. I've seen so many more of these this semester come into my office. I've noticed when I'm talking with students who have ADHD, We'll be okay for about 5 minutes. We'll start talking about heavy stuff, and out comes the stress ball, or out will come the fidget toy. They can do that and channel some of that energy, that nervous energy, into those things, and it helps them be able to focus better on our conversation at hand. Students with mental health disabilities. And so these, along with ADHD, along with so many other disabilities, are invisible. You may or may not know that a student has a given diagnosis. A student may have been able to manage prior to COVID, but with this added stress, maybe now the diagnosis rises to the level of a disability. There are so many unknowns and so many things that are hidden right now. Students with mental health disabilities may feel overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed, like feel like they don't know which end is up. The students that I've talked to even recently said, would you please ask the professors to be kinder than they think they may need to, because we are scared, we are struggling, we're not doing well here. I answered the phone the other day and the student said, hi, this is so-and-so, and I want you to know I'm giving up. And I said, wait, let's back up here. So that the feeling of being overwhelmed and completely out of control is very real. So please show kindness, please show understanding. Students with mental health disabilities also may not be able to access therapy right now. Maybe because their provider is only doing telehealth. Maybe their provider is sick with COVID. I've heard about this in the past couple of weeks as well. Maybe they can't physically go where they need to go. Maybe they were set up in a town around here, but now they moved back home. There are lots of reasons that there's no access to therapy or a lack of access right now. Some practices have even closed during COVID-19. If these students rely on a provider, rely on medication and therapy to help them make it through, and that piece is missing on top of everything else, it's very difficult. They may experience increased disorganization in school and personal life. That's a big thing. The feeling of being out of control, feeling of being overwhelmed. They may have mental, physical, emotional, electronic, all kinds of disorganization. Share clear instructions and clear information. The more clear you can make what you share, the better it will be for them. They may feel isolated and lonely. A student last week said to me, I would like people to know if they could just be someone to somebody who feels like nobody in these times, it would go so far. That's what I, as someone with a mental health diagnosis, that's what I need. So I said, I will share that. I will not quote your name, but I will. So please be someone to somebody who feels like nobody. Again, these are invisible. You can't see necessarily when you're talking to people face to face. They can hide even further behind a screen. Online platforms may feel cold and intimidating. There again, be very intentional in connecting with students virtually. Take that extra time to connect and to say hello and to ask, do you need anything? How can I help you? That may be what will draw the student in and allow them to feel like they don't need to drop the class, that they can complete, they can survive, and they can actually thrive. Students on the autism spectrum. I've heard a lot from our students on the spectrum, especially in March when we pivoted to online. I had so many emails from students saying, is there anything you can do? I need to be face to face. I don't like this change. I absolutely hate this. So they've had discomfort on many levels. First of all, they may have discomfort with masks, and it may not be just I don't like to wear it. It's a fashion statement. For them, it may be a sensory issue. Some of our students on the autism spectrum have great issues with texture. What may feel constricted to them may not feel constricted at all to us. So it may be appropriate to allow your student to step out briefly to remove the mask, take a couple of deep breaths, then come back to class. Talk with ARC if you have any questions about that. It doesn't need to be something that's done every 5 minutes. It may be once or twice at most during the class. if this is a concern, we can certainly quantify this. We can talk more about it. Students on the spectrum may feel disorganized. They may feel upset. They may also feel out of control. They crave that structure and order and predictability. That is absolutely not what we have here. If you can help create order, structure, predictability in your course, if when they log into Canvas, they know that all their assignments are always going to be right here. Class notes are always going to be here. You get to the test the same way each time. Once they learn that pattern, that's going to help give them some feeling of control and some sense of calmness. Students on the autism spectrum may be confused with learning this new environment, learning these new rules. They have difficulty generalizing to new settings. What worked before, they're not going to understand sometimes how it can work just a little bit differently in a new setting. Frequent check-ins for understanding and clarification are going to be so very important and so very appreciated from them. Frequent reminders of where to get help. Don't forget about tutors, ARC, things like that. You may feel like you're repeating too much. I promise you, for students on the spectrum, you are not. The more they hear it, the better they're going to feel. They will not, as stereotypically, they will not pick up on new information intuitively. So it is okay, it's actually quite helpful to state the obvious. It's quite helpful actually to overstate the obvious. So anything you can do like that would be very, very helpful. Students with learning disabilities, they may also have difficulty engaging with the LMS. They may have intentionally avoided online classes. Now that there's not an option, they may be very unsure of Canvas, very unsure of MyMathLab or any other electronic access program or lab or piece that they have. Share clear information on how to access it, how to navigate it. I know the help desk has a link on their page where you can get to how to use Canvas, how to start your access, any kind of resources like that that you can share. Also, if you could talk with them and share as you feel comfortable sharing, that will certainly help. Access needs may be different in an online course. If you have in-class handouts, it may take them longer to get through if they're trying to read through if they have dyslexia. The reading part is going to take longer. So it may look different in an online course. What is your time limit? Are they expected to have instant access and instant response to something you post, or what does that look like? You can refer to us, to the Accessibility Resource Center, for help with electronic access, with resources. Again, we can do materials production. We can make sure whatever handouts, whatever things that you post in your class, whatever your information is, that is accessible through a screen reader. E-text is something that we will handle. Students should already have their e-text books. If there is a need there and an e-text book does not already exist, if we can't get it from another source, we can create one. So if that is an issue, we're more than happy to work with that. The students with learning disabilities, this is going to be invisible as well, because you can't look at someone and say, that looks just like dyslexia. The frustration is going to be there, but it's not going to be apparent at first what it is. Students with chronic health conditions. So they may experience increased fear and anxiety over illness and infection. So they may feel like they are out of control as well. They may have increased stress, and that increased stress from everything that's going on may cause an actual decrease in their immune function. It's kind of it's a process, and it's a slippery slope that they don't want to go down. So where you can set control and order, please do so. Have a set structure and order for your class. That predictability, one thing they don't have to worry about trying to control, that will help them feel better. Be understanding and be kind. They need to hear from you that you care, that you're working with them. When their health is completely out of control, they may be very frustrated because their body has gone into a flare. They can't control that. So many times with chronic health conditions, they are invisible. and stress will make them worse. Things they don't have control of are so great. It helps with the things where they do have control. If they feel like they have more control in your class, that's going to help them. Also, think about what's happening now. Flare-ups may be seen as even more severe, as suspicious even by others. If we see someone who has certain symptoms, we automatically think, I know I automatically think, I wonder if that's COVID. What if the flare in your chronic health disability may have some of those same symptoms, but it's not, it's just a flare? So now students are looking at you, faculty, staff, people are looking at you even more critically. That's even more stress. It's tough to be in their position. They're already nervous to begin with. Their health really may be at stake more than the health of some others. Another thing I've heard from these students, they can only control themselves and what they do. They cannot control others. So when they see the student beside them take off a mask and eat very slowly, or take off a mask and say, well, I don't believe this is real. I'm just going to take this off for a few minutes. It could directly impact them. They can't control these other people, and that's very, very frustrating. So please keep those kind of things in mind. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. How to help? What do? We find ourselves in this position. How do we work together? How do we weather this? Virtual office hours. I've heard so many of you doing that, and students are so excited by that. That gives them access, and if they're not comfortable going out, if they're not able to go out, if they're at a distance themselves, that is good. That is so very helpful. Virtual study groups. I know in WebEx you can lock the room so you can have certain rooms, certain groups that you can have. Anything like that to help your students feel more connected and to help them continue to learn. Students have told me they just want professors to give a measure of grace, be flexible within reason, absolutely within reason, but give a measure of grace. There are so many nervous students, so many that feel completely out of control. They want reassurance they can do this. Be as responsive as you can. Again, the students really do need this reassurance. Be intentional. This is a great time for intentionality. Be intentional in responding, checking in, letting the students know, even though they can't see you, they don't have the same access they did to you when they were physically here and you were physically here on campus. Let them know you're still available. That can certainly take down nerves. Remember, some students are technophobic and they have avoided online courses at all costs until now. I have so many students that have said, but I was so happy I had all my classes face-to-face, and at the last moment, this one changed, and now I'm stuck. So we have a lot of nervous students out there, a lot of technophobic students, a lot of things out there. If you have any questions, call us. We are more than happy to talk with you. We're more than happy to troubleshoot with you at any time. Call us, come see us. We can talk with you in person. We can talk to you via phone, via WebEx. If we don't know the answer, we'll work together and we'll find it. What we found ourselves doing a lot this semester is putting our heads together and saying, so for students with disabilities, what's a disability? So what's the access barrier? What kind of limitation do we have? How can we combat that? How do we work with that now, given our current situation? So much of what we do is not one size fits all. It's not a cookie cutter approach. So much of what we do is case by case basis, and we can certainly work with you now, and we'll consider these things on a case by case basis. If you look at our website, you may see these apps. Whenever we made the shift to online back in March, we put some of these on our website because our students were saying, well, how am I supposed to do this? What can I do? I need some help. For help with organization, you have My Study Life. It can help with planning, organization. For help with to-do list, this may be what assignments do I need to get done today, next week? Students like to do organization and things different ways. Here are some options. To help avoid procrastination. I don't know if you know anything about the Focus Keeper. app, but it's available on the Apple App Store. It's good. It's a neat one. Also a website blocker. Several students have told me, but when I go to log on to my online class, Instagram calls or Facebook calls, or I just had to watch one more dog video on YouTube. Website blockers. These are good things to do. They can block these websites for a particular period of time, hopefully have some very focused study time, and then reward themselves with something fun afterwards. To encourage or enhance productivity, you've got these apps that you can still see here. The last one is another white noise app, Noisily. It's neat because you can listen to maybe sounds of the forest, you can listen to water, you can hear running water and add wind, you can add a thunderstorm, you can add a coffee shop, so you can add till you have different things that you have the sound combination that's comfortable for you. Also, don't forget what wonderful resources we have here. One thing that we are constantly doing is acting as a referral agent here. Don't forget, here at UNCP, we have the care team. There are needs now that are coming up that have never come up before because we've never been exactly here before. Don't forget you've got the care team and the scope of services that they can provide. Don't forget you have CAPS. CAPS can talk with students at a distance. You don't physically have to go there, especially if students are not able to access their normal provider. This is going to bring a lot of comfort, hopefully a lot of help and during this time. Don't forget about tutoring. We have the Center for Student Success, TRIO, for students with disabilities. Those are wonderful tutoring helps. A lot of our students, it's one thing if they can come to class face-to-face and have their tutoring face-to-face, but that's not where we are. So don't forget about tutoring services. Don't forget about the Writing Center. That's also something that can be accessed at a distance. Papers are still here. Citations are still here. All those questions that students have, they're still here. So thankfully, we can access these resources at a distance. Also, don't forget us here at the Accessibility Resource Center. We're happy to talk with you, happy to talk with students. Especially before the semester began, with some access issues, with hearing, with placement, with so many things, WebEx has been probably my best friend right now. I've talked to so many professors and students. The three of us would get on a WebEx call, discuss our issues, find our resolution, and we could do it in a fraction of the time because we were all on the same page, in the same place, virtually. So we're here if you need us. More than happy to talk with you there. Some of the information that I shared today came from a webinar from March from Michelle Mullen, supporting college students with mental health conditions in the wake of COVID-19. That was very eye-opening. So many of those things I knew intuitively, but she stated them outright. So some of the information that I shared came from her webinar. And some also came from the Teach Autism program from UNC Chapel Hill. What questions, if any, do you have?
Thank you, Vanessa. I've been watching the chat in case there are any questions. So to give people a moment to ask those questions, I just had a couple questions I wanted to ask.
Okay.
First of all, thank you so much for amplifying and sharing what students are telling you. You might be hearing from students things that they don't feel comfortable telling their individual faculty members. So thank you for sharing what it is they're saying.
You're very welcome.
And as you think about what you hear them say, could you speak for a moment maybe about universal design, especially as what is good for students with disabilities might be good for students in general?
Probably the main place that I have heard people talk about universal design would be in testing. If you think about where we are now, a lot of people are concerned about, well, if it's at a distance, I can't see the students taking the test. What if they cheat? If the test is designed such that students have to process and synthesize the information and put it back in that sort of manner, where it's harder to cheat because you're asking me my individual process, my synthesis of this material, as opposed to just maybe a multiple choice test on something. Those kind of things are good. So universal design is just as you know, having the environment, the materials, the most usable for the most people. I think testing is probably the biggest area we see here, but captions would be another thing. Even if you don't know you have somebody who's deaf and hard of hearing in your class, if everything is captioned already when it comes up, if any videos you show, or if you record your lectures and you do edit the captions and go ahead and put those up, if I am in a horribly noisy environment and I'm trying my best to hear, this is the only time I can log in. I have my kids in the background. If it's really noisy outside my window, I don't have air conditioning, but I've got to leave the window up. If for whatever reason it's loud, I can read the captions. So I can hear mostly, but I can also, I can hear through my eyes too. I can read to be able to see what I'm missing, and I can check what I'm hearing or not hearing. Also, if the professor has a strong accent, that might be helpful too. I've listened to speakers where I've had to look at the captions to make sure I thought I heard it, but I wasn't sure. Also, if I kind of zone out for a minute, I have gone back to the captions and gone, oh goodness, I wasn't paying attention. Let me catch myself up there. So I think those are two easy, easy places to incorporate universal design. I know there are many more that you all can think about. Those are the first two that come to mind.
Thank you, Vanessa. Your answer has me thinking about a webinar that Miko gave recently about multiple forms of assessment. So if
Yes,
listeners are interested in learning about those multiple forms of assessment, check out that video that he's posted to Online Learning's YouTube channel.
absolutely. That sounds great.
Thank you,
And we
Vanessa. Following up with what you mentioned, in the Office of Online Learning, we promote a lot the idea of non-proctor assessments. What is your take when it comes to having to make a choice between proctoring or not proctoring and taking into consideration potential disabilities in students?
Well, with students with disabilities, whatever accommodations they should be receiving, typically with testing, it is extended time. Most of our students use time and a half. Sometimes they will need double time, but that's clearly stated to the professors. It really depends on what the professor wants to do. One thing I would caution against, if a student, if a professor is giving an exam to a class, the student with a disability cannot be the only one who's required to be proctored. So if all students are proctored, the student with a disability would need to be proctored as well. If no students are proctored, then that student wouldn't be either. I know that some people are using Proctorio. I know some other schools are using Respondus. One thing that I have been reading about on the listservs for exams that are proctored, you may have students who fidget more than others for ADHD, for other reasons, and so behavior may look suspicious to the proctor. So if there are ever any questions about what someone's actually seeing, then definitely come to us. We can talk to you about functional limitations of a disability and what it may look like, and where it may look suspicious to one person, for that student, it's actually a normal presentation of who they are and their disability. So there's some things to consider when you're thinking about proctoring, things like that. But as far as to proctor or not to proctor, I think that would be really up to the professor. Again, if there's anything specific that anyone would like to troubleshoot, I'm more than happy to talk with you. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but if not, please let me know more and we'll continue to talk about this.
No, that actually is a good starting point. I just wanted to have an answer of how the professor needs to start thinking and what things to take into consideration. So those are good points. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I agree. As you're noting there, we have so many more kinds of assessments we can give thanks to technology. And we should be sort of thoughtful about proctoring as we move forward. So thank you for calling attention to that, Vanessa.
You're very welcome.
I do have a question from the chat.
Okay.
One suggestion in terms of accessibility for visual needs is to have fewer bullets on each slide.
Sure.
Having a smaller number of them on each slide allows sort of for larger fonts. However, the problem is explanation. So the questioner asks, I've used the notes area for additional text, and is that acceptable for screen readers?
That would be something we would need to check and make sure. If you want to send us a PowerPoint or even a portion of one, we can take a look and see. As long as the student can access it, and that I think that's going to be a let us check it for you. We can certainly do an access check. I would assume as long as it's in a Word doc format, and I assume on a PowerPoint, a screen reader will be able to do all that. But the notes section, I'll be happy to take a look at that for you if you will send it to me. And if it's not accessible, then we'll figure out how to make it accessible. That's one thing that Miss Debbie Bullard works very hard with, and she's so good at what she does. But she and or I can certainly take a look at that, and we'll make sure we figure out the answer to that question. But yes, please email me. I'll make sure we figure that out. But you're exactly right about fewer bullet points per slide. Also, make sure you have good contrast. Make sure the font is larger, like you said. Dark on light, light on dark will work. The less busy a slide, the easier it's going to be to focus. And if you think about, too, if students are using accessibility features on their computer, they may be zooming in, so it may be harder to navigate around a slide if there's a lot of busyness therein. So yes, thank you very much.
I appreciated that question. There are so many panes, I think, on the different windows that we see. We're not quite sure sometimes what a screen reader might catch. So
Right.
thank you for allowing them to offer to send that PowerPoint over. I had one
Yes.
final question, perhaps.
Okay.
As we think about how long the pandemic might go on, we sometimes hear 2021, 2022 before things are back to what used to be, perhaps. What are your strategies or what are your thoughts as you advise students or faculty to sort of prepare themselves for a long-term change in the way they do things or a long-term disruption to access to care or access to their providers, as you mentioned? What are you thinking about as in your field of accessibility resource, and what are you thinking about in terms of what we can do?
I would say, first of all, know your resources. Know what's around you. Know the UNCP resources. That's one thing I have been doing, is trying to make sure I know what do we as a university offer. And I tell students, new students all the time, we have so many wonderful resources. This is a great place to be for lots of reasons, but especially because of the resources. So know what's around you, start branching out and do your research to figure out what areas do you specifically have questions in, what else might be out there. I have been asking entities, like I've called CAPS and said, what do you have? If I have a student who has this question, which leads me to think about all these others, how do I get there from here? So for me, it's a lot of asking questions. What's out there? What does it look like now? The entities that I work with the most, I've asked them, are you planning to change? How long are you going to be in an online format? I'm trying to figure out for me so I can pass along to the students, how long are we fully online? Might we change back to partly a hybrid situation? What is this going to look like in the future? I think being open and being a researcher. I think don't be afraid to ask questions. This is an especially important time to realize there are no silly questions, because if you don't ask it, somebody else is going to come right behind you and ask it. So definitely ask all those questions. I'm trying to encourage students to be as flexible and be as adaptable as they possibly can with where we find ourselves right now. We don't know that we are going to finish this semester face to face. There's a good chance we will, but what if something unpredicted comes up, and what if we don't? I'm trying to tell students, take control where you can take control. There are so many things that are not within our control. What can you do? I'm telling students, you can learn to navigate the learning management system. You can learn Canvas. You can learn online learning. You can learn how to do that. So if you want to do it again in the future, you've already done it now. You won't have that awkward first time. You've already experienced this. You know how this works. I'm trying to encourage students to take advantage and learn from all of these experiences, the pleasant ones and the unpleasant ones. I'm encouraging them to see if there's something that you don't like, what's within your control to change, How can you do something different? If you're not sure, then talk with me. How can we do something different? Is this something you can change? Do you like synchronous classes, asynchronous classes? Know the difference. If this comes up in the future, you're going to need to know. So we're just trying to expand minds, expand horizons. And it would encourage our faculty and staff to do the same thing. Think about where can you have control? How can you help a student who feels completely out of control feel like they do have a measure of control when you yourself may not be completely sure you have that same measure of control? I know that's what I'm doing in my office. I'm trying to give some structure, some predictability, set office hours, set responses, things like that, things that students and faculty and staff can depend on, even when it may feel like my world is swirling around me. So I would just encourage all of us, please be kind, be understanding. I think this is a good time to live with grace. Let's give grace to one another, because I may think I know what the next person's going through, but so many things are invisible, so many things they keep hidden intentionally, unintentionally. We just don't know what's going on within another person. So these are unprecedented times. Let's all work together. I am more than happy to troubleshoot with anybody at any point. But I thank you all for what you have done. I'm hearing good things from the students. And so they're grateful because they're scared. They're grateful that you're helping and that you're reaching out. You are available, you are accessible. And it's an awkward time for all of us. So I would say thank you all for what you have done and what you're going to continue to do. And I think it's important to realize we're all on the same team. We will come out the other side of this. Things may look a little bit different, but we will get there.
It's a powerful way to wrap up our webinar today. Grace, kindness, reaching out to others and supporting all of us no matter where we are and what we're going through. So thank you very much, Vanessa, for today's presentation.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with everyone. I'm so grateful for this chance. We are here if you need us.
And I'll just wrap up further by saying that, again, this is a webinar that's a part of our Certificate in Accessibility and Inclusion for Teaching and Learning, jointly sponsored by the Accessibility Resource Center and the Teaching and Learning Center. If you're interested in joining the certificate after listening to this webinar, please contact Vanessa and me. If you've listened to this webinar as part of that certificate cohort, please check your email for more information as to how you can apply what you've learned here towards your certification. So again, thanks to everyone who's joined us today. We really appreciate you being here, and we wish you the best as you continue your teaching and learning in a very difficult semester. Take care and have a good day.
Thank you.